military agenda is interested on the potential weaponization and misuse of the brain sciences for nefarious agenda, for political, intelligence, and military uses.
Thousands of government-sponsored experiments did take place at hospitals, universities, and military bases around our nation.
We are not professing to tell you the complete story of these activities. We are professing to tell you the complete story that we know. Right. But these records that we've uncovered don't tell the story. They tell pieces of it.
This is a story that has been told in bits and pieces. This is an attempt to pull most of it together.
Americans were kept in the dark about the effects of what was being done to them. The deception extended beyond the test subjects themselves to encompass their families and the American people as a whole. For these experiments were kept secret.
The legacy of MKUltra and COINTELPRO is being played out in the lives of thousands of Americans today. Individuals become targets for various reasons. Some are political activists or whistleblowers, while others are simply human beings, chosen as experimental subjects at random, target practice. The Mini-Manhattan Project to control the human mind, after decades of experimentation and billions of dollars, has landed on the moon in a very real sense.
Now you may say, this doesn't concern me, or my children, or my community, but this is less and less true.
What has gone from the drawing board to the reality is this: the use of neural interfacing and physiological interfacing through the idea of remote-controlled small-scale systems to create a nanoswarm of biopenetrable materials that you cannot see, that can penetrate all but the most robust biochemical filters, that are able to integrate themselves through a variety of membranes, mucous membranes, and wherever, mouth, nose, ears, eyes, and they can be done in such a level that their presence is almost impossible to detect, and as such the attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate. The idea here is to put minimal-sized electrodes in a network within a brain through only minimal intervention to be able to read and write into the brain function in real time, remotely. And by affecting the way that brain is built and the way it functions, influence in ways that are kinetic and non-kinetic the attitudes, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, activities, and relative vulnerabilities and predispositions of those individuals for whom may threaten us. The brain sciences are currently being investigated and in some cases are being used in such endeavors, not only domestically but worldwide.
Patent number 6011991, remote brain computer interface neural monitoring, i.e. via satellite. They can not only monitor your thoughts, but they can modify your behavior remotely.
It used to be that I need to be exceedingly close to someone to now influence them with a weapon, and now what we see is we create both distal potential as well as much more capable potential to affect them in a variety of different ways. How much of this material would I need? Take a look. This is the front of my pen. This amount of nanomaterial, if be able to maintain and sustain with regard to its deliverability and aerosolization, could in fact affect all of you. I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, not a month goes by where I don't get a call at my institute by someone telling me that someone in the government implanted these things in their brain without them knowing. I'm not kidding. And although it may not be that the sky is falling yet, folks, it looks like rain. Bring an umbrella.
The nanotechnology is in the bodies, the brains of all 318 million Americans. Everyone's infected. They've been spraying the nanotechnology into the hydrosphere for the last 25 years, which filters down into the water supply and the food chain. Once ingested, the nanotech then migrates to the brain and adheres to the neurotransmitters of the victim's brain and begins to speak to and decode those neurotransmitters after it's activated. It can be activated, the nanotechnology, from thousands of miles away using a process called directed energy flashing photons.
See, nanocells are real small, 1,000 times smaller than these dust particulates. You inhale it, they go to work replicating, spreading like a virus, multiplying in exponentials. 6 months' time, I could have 100 million people converted, ditch diggers, porn stars, and presidents. Not one would be the wiser. 100 million people who buy what I want them to buy and do pretty much damn well anything I figure they ought to do.
Basically, every 2 years, we can put twice as many components on a chip. And because they're closer together, they run faster. And so computers get twice as capable overall for the same price every year. So we went from building something that fits in your pocket to something that's the size of a blood cell.
In the Internet of Things, the person's details, exact location, and other information is readable by a computer or wireless network. Major computer companies and corporations have foreseen the rising trend of ubiquitous computing for many years. Intel's president, Paul Artellini, announced recently that the next 4 decades would be about ubiquitous computing, encompassing every aspect of daily life. In a February 2000 document from Hewlett-Packard's Internet and Mobile Systems Laboratory, we find that Packard wants to make people, places, and things web-present. The document details the infrastructure of the Internet of Things. Our goal is a bridge between the World Wide Web and the physical world we inhabit. It also includes the ability to provide people, places, and things, electronic or otherwise, with a web resource that is used to store information about them, and which is automatically correlated with their physical presence.
Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? There's actual discussion about that. You will rule on that, mark my words, before your tenure is over. Can brain scans be used to determine whether a person is inclined toward criminality or violent behavior? You will rule on that.
So understand that this supercomputer is using a computer multiplexer, which is routing the signal to a tower, satellite, or mobile platform. Then the tower, satellite, or mobile platform relays the signal to the digital receiver, similar to how cell phone technology works. So the digital receiver is tracked and pinpointed in real time, just like a cell phone, because this technology is dependent upon timing and location. Except with CIA and DI mind control technologies, the digital receiver is not a phone, it's a human brain. The brain of the victim has been digitalized by the nanotechnology inside of it. The nanotechnology is in the bodies, the brains of all 318 million Americans. Everyone's infected. They've been spraying the nanotechnology into the hydrosphere for the last 25 years, which filters down into the water supply and the food chain. Once ingested, the nanotech then migrates to the brain and adheres to the neurotransmitters of the victim's brain and begins to speak to and decode those neurotransmitters after it's activated. It can be activated, the nanotechnology, from thousands of miles away using a process called directed energy flashing photons.
This convergence of the digital and physical worlds opens a doorway to a whole new kind of surveillance that may give rise to what some call a synchronic society.
I don't need to identify you by your uniform, by your clothes, but perhaps by certain anthropometric characteristics, and in this case, biological signatures. So the idea of indwelling biosensors that are able to then upload remotely.
The brain activity of an individual is monitored and transmitted to a remote location by satellite for mapping and mastering the human domain. At the remote location, the monitored brain activity is compared with pre-recorded normalized brain activity curves, waveforms, or patterns to determine if a match or substantial match is found. If such a match is found, then the computer at the remote location determines that the individual was attempting to communicate a word, phrase, or thought corresponding to the match stored in the normalized signal.
Remote neural monitoring is actually an actual military defense system using satellite tower-based platforms, mobile-based platforms, by way of, they're basically relay devices. These tower satellites and mobile platforms are relay devices. These, by electro-optics, virtual interfaces, and so forth. Brain-to-computer interface, electronic brain-to-brain interface. This is how the technology is designed to work, and they utilize microwaves. It's easier to understand if you think of laser imaging and tracking, okay? Those type of systems. Basically, they're using, remote neural monitoring is designed to image and measure and transmit brain and neural activity.
Those of you working in the area of biosensors, RFIDs, understand the potential power here. This is a key area for dual use because these types of sensors are being developed for populational monitoring of key biological variables that can be then uptaken into health information databases. The same type of thing can be used for other forms of information, not least of which is tracking and identification.
The sentient world simulation does this automatically. So what this is a synthetic mirror of the world we live in. Not a piece of it, but the entire world. And this program constantly recalibrates the simulation based on real-time world events, trends, theories, economics, industry, almost everything you can think of that would contribute to an accurate model. Not to mention the individual pieces of data on every single person represented in the simulation. So to put this in perspective, what this is a digital clone of our world and everyone in it.
You can also utilize something called Titan, which is tiered integrated tracking and access networks that utilize biologically implantable chips to then track key individuals in a variety of circumstances and then yoke these to known information about the way brains work to create narratives and behaviors. And essentially what this does is this adds to what's called human terrain teaming.
The hive mind teams can read the return training signal in real time as well, because each hive mind team, which generally consists of no more than 3 people. You get too many people involved in a hive mind, it becomes schizophrenic, the communication, etc. Generally, no more than 3 to 6, generally just 3 people. Okay, it depends on the target really, but understand that it can be accomplished from thousands of miles away. They don't need to be next to the victim. That's a common misunderstanding of how the technology is deployed. They think that people, and they often can't get next to the victim because line of sight is necessary for the purposes of verification, etc. But this system of conscious computers that the victim is remotely tied to for life are automated, active, and adaptive. It's an automated, active, and adaptive system of remote neural networks. So the RNN system routes the hidden this signal, this hidden carrier frequency, okay, that's specifically tuned to the brainwave signature of the victim, to the digital receiver of the victim's brain, and then that stream of energy interfaces with the nanotechnology inside of it, and that's how the nanotechnology speaks to and decodes the neurotransmitters of the victim's brain.
Dr. Kingsley Dennis, a research associate for the Center for Mobilities Research at Lancaster University, describes the synchronic society in this way. The development of increasingly sentient smart environments will go some way towards creating a more systemic relationship of interconnections and interdependencies between humans, objects, machines, and locality.
The set of models that make up the synthetic environment encompasses the behavior of individuals, organizations, institutions, infrastructures, and geographies while simultaneously capturing the trends emerging from the interaction among entities as well as between entities and the environment. I want to make this very clear. This is not a conspiracy theory. Your data is being collected. What data, you say?
Your every activity, transaction, physical or virtual, communication, and yes, even your innermost personal thoughts will be cataloged and uploaded to a Hive-based AI system on the global information grid.
The idea to then be able to take a key individual set of biological metrics and immediately in real time pull them into a large-scale data analytic to say, this is who this person is, and this is where this person's been, and this is who this person's been interacting with, could be very, very useful. The more we know, the bolder we go. Puts the brain at our fingertips. It also obviously opens the specter. It clearly opens a Pandora's box.
Biological knowledge multiplied by computing power, multiplied by data, equals the ability to hack humans. And the AI revolution or crisis is not just AI, it's also biology, it's biotech. There is a lot of hype now around AI and computers, but it is just half the story. The other half is the biological knowledge coming from brain science and biology. And once you link that to AI, what you get is the ability to hack humans. And maybe I'll explain what it means, the ability to hack humans, to create an algorithm that understands me better than I understand myself, and can therefore manipulate me, enhance me, or replace me. And this is something that our philosophical baggage and all our belief in human agency and free will and the customer is always right and the voter knows best, this just falls apart once you have this kind of ability.
It creates an opportunity to affect the way humans think, feel, and behave on a variety of levels. And those levels don't only extend within the individual organism, In other words, being able to affect thought, emotion, behavior with regard to ranging all the way from the synaptic to our social interactions individually. But it also allows us to then exert certain levels of intellectual assessment, knowledge acquisition and control about human relations on the individual to cohort to group to community to local, regional, even global scale.
The ultimate aim would be to archive enough data on each individual to be able to make a computer model of everyone on the planet, one that could be used to predict the behaviors and reactions of every single person in the event of various scenarios.
So this supercomputer that's targeting the victim is actually a system of computers, of conscious computers with a will, intellect, and emotion of their own. Now, it's really not their own. It's the bioalgorithms which make up the will, intellect, and emotion of those that they've copied and destroyed. Mind transfer, mind copying, whole brain emulation, etc., for the purposes of training, research, and development. Those algorithms, those machine learning algorithms, the system then takes those algorithms and correlates communication and behavior data. When I say communication and behavior data, what I'm referring to is impulses and identifiers, okay? And then that brain activity is then sampled, remotely measured, and then integrated back into RNN data for the purposes of creating a cognitive model of the victim's brain. So the victim is tied to this system of conscious computers. It's not just one computer, okay? Remotely by way of this bidirectional stream of electromagnetic low-frequency waves specifically tuned to the brainwave signature of the victim. Okay, it's called the information and injection feedback loop. It's bidirectional, so they can upload, download at the speed of light. The system can, the supercomputer can. This information and injection feedback loop, this neural link between the victim's brain and the supercomputer.
Brain reality is your reality. And if in fact I can import information into that brain and take outputs from that brain and link that to an avatar so that brain thinks that it's embodied and moving in the world and experiencing the world, can we do this? Yeah, we can do these kind of things.
Increasingly, relationships between humans, devices, environments are being merged or steered towards a new construction of social life, one that embeds the individual as a digitally rendered identity within a global information gridlock.
This is how it works. This program collects data. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing right now, this system is compiling data on you. And not just about where you are and what you are doing, but how you are feeling. Because after all, you cannot truly have an accurate simulation without factoring in real human emotion.
I can see you and hear you. I can sense your environment, and I can respond to your emotions. I guess you could say I'm putting a human face on artificial intelligence.
Right now, there is a miniature digital version of you, living, meaning in a sentient nature, in a synthetic digital environment. People, this is the Sims game from hell. Do you know that with this program I can throw you into a scenario where there is a catastrophe just to see how you react to it, essentially gaining the ability to predict your next move.
The cortical modem, implants in the brain that allow real-time input and output from the brain remotely.
It is called the Sentient World Simulation. The program's aim, according to its creator, is to be a continuously running, continually updated mirror model of the real world that can be used to predict and evaluate future events and courses of action. In practical terms, that equates to a computer simulation of the entire planet, complete with billions of nodes representing every person on the Earth.
Patent number 6011991, remote brain computer interface neural monitoring, i.e. via satellite, directed not necessarily by human handlers, but by a computer system that sits on a global information grid in a network-centric environment. They can not only monitor your thoughts, but they can modify your behavior remotely.
Here, the emphasis is on an embedded sensory world that will influence and fundamentally alter social practices. Such a cyber-nomadic landscape has been defined by three primary forces of physical-digital fusion: the augmented self, and digitally catalyzed masses. Ultimately, Dennis sees this technology creating a heavily surveilled population inside a global information gridlock that will be nearly impossible to escape.
Your brain is remotely tied, the cerebral cortex is remotely tied to a supercomputer for life, which monitors and manipulates all electromagnetic activity of the victim's brain. You cannot compromise. You cannot negotiate. You cannot surrender to a computer. It will continue to do what it is programmed to do.
Yes, we can absolutely yoke brains to machines to create these interfaces. There's a brand new DARPA project that starts this month called NESD, Neural Engineering Systems Designs. The colloquial name for that is the cortical modem. Implants in the brain that allow real-time input and output from the brain remotely.
Patent number 6011991, Remote Brain Computer Interface Neural Monitoring. This invention relates to a system and method where brain activity of a particular individual is monitored and transmitted in a wireless manner, i.e. via satellite, from the location of the individual to a remote location so that the brain activity can be computer analyzed at the remote location, thereby enabling the computer and/or individuals at the remote location to determine what the monitored individual was thinking or wishing to communicate. In certain embodiments, this invention relates to the analysis of brain waves or brain activity and/or to the remote firing of select brain nodes in order to produce a predetermined effect on the individual. They can not only monitor your thoughts, but they can modify your behavior remotely.
Whether or not there are any human rights, if there's any constitutional protections for something like freedom of thought or mental privacy or cognitive liberty, nothing like that exists yet.
Is there a paradox between free speech and the loose lips of a computer reading what you're thinking about saying before you've even said it?
Thoughts and feelings that you may not be able to verbalize or you may not want to verbalize, and they may still leave a signature in your brain, and we might be able to decode that.
In certain forms of mind reading, I think, legal systems don't bake in any presumption that we can do that, and so there's no legal protections that could be afforded to you.
Perhaps no other area of the brain sciences has been so contemporarily provocative. The ability to peer into the living brain in real time, not just to assess its structure, but to assess its function, using ever-increasing techniques that are sophisticated to engage the granularity of the fineness of what's happening at a variety of levels, from the gross to the very local. To see what brain areas are differentially active under different conditions of thought, emotion, behavior. To then trace what brain areas are intercommunicative as we engage various things, and to use this in a way that's not only descriptive, but to increasingly use this in a way that is predictive. To be able to recreate images that an individual has seen, feelings that an individual has felt, sounds, music that an individual has heard, simply from interpreting the pattern and registry of a brain scan.
Basically, they turn the brain of the victim into their very own visual, verbal, and auditive communication system. It takes time, it didn't happen overnight, but that's what they're doing. They're turning the brains of their victim, into their very own specific visual, verbal, and auditive communication system.
In a very real sense, what we're doing is we're taking images, levels of density of light, of computational inference, of each little box that's being scanned in the brain, and we're doing exactly as you're doing right here. Look at the word. Look at this word. You see a little circle, another little circle with a line, a straight line, and a little loop. And in your head, what you're saying is C-A-N, can. That means something to you. So what you're doing is you're scanning the lines, you're scanning the image, and you're reading the word. You're inferring meaning what that word is. So, are we in fact scanning the brain and reading the mind? Literally, yes we are.
Orwell's 3 cubic centimeters of reserved freedom inside your head has been impinged upon. It's been invaded by the development of technology, and the powers and technologies that be are on the cusp of data mining our very gray matter, and might easily turn over secrets we had hoped to keep, or simply comments that are too rude or inappropriate to say in the first place. Think about it.
And once you decode internal speech, then you essentially have the sort of worst possible brain decoding device.
They have the capability now to reduce humanity to the sum total of the data collected on each human network node.
I want to make this very clear. This is not a conspiracy theory.
So what you're telling me, every one of us should be in fear of this because every one of us at some point will be targeted?
The technology's advanced that far.
There is a very real risk that you are going to become a full-blown 24/7 targeted individual. And this technology at that point, when it is nationwide, will be used by automated computer, supercomputer software programming that will manipulate the emotions and the behavior and the thoughts of everybody in the United States of America. And it can all be done remotely. It's very much like the microchip kind of tracking the New World Order, this entire, control grid that's supposed to be rolled out against the American people someday. And I'm here to tell you that it's already here. There isn't going to come a day where there's troops in the streets and tanks rolling down your neighborhood and riot gear and all this stuff. We might have isolated incidents like that. It might get like that every once in a while, but the true control grid is this technology, voice-to-skull, hive mind, behavior manipulation technology, and it can all be done remotely.
The RNN system then remotely monitors and measures all electromagnetic activity of the victim's brain for life.
It's the ultimate weapon.
So the targeted individuals aren't crazy after all.
And when you people think about, well, I'm not going to get chipped, you're already chipped.
But if anyone tells you that they know the details of what 5G is going to become, run the other way. If something can be connected, it will be connected. Hundreds of billions of microchips connected in products from pill bottles to plant waterers. We must reject the notion that the 5G future will be the sole providence of urban areas. The 5G revolution will touch all corners of our country.
This powder-sized chip, and that's a salt crystal, so this is a small thing, is something called the Mu chip from Hitachi. It's the smallest commercially available RFID system in the world, and can be pulse-powered by radio waves. It doesn't require a battery. You can literally scatter this stuff like dust, or embed it into a sheet of paper. And you know what the really interesting thing about this technology is? This was commercially released 10 years ago. So, the inevitability of smart dust. So what is smart dust? Well, smart dust, of course, isn't a new concept. It originated with DARPA back in the 90s. And it's general purpose computing, sensors, wireless networking, all bundled up into millimeter scale sensor modes, drifting in the air currents, flecks of computing power settling on your skin, ingested, monitoring you inside and out.
There are still something of an arsenal, albeit covert, of neural weapons.
Researchers have developed a revolutionary interface enabling a connection between a human brain and a machine. Considering that DARPA's research has an end goal of military application, it's not hard to imagine where that could be used.
Neuroscience and technology can and will be weaponized, not only on the horizon, but in the realities of today.
So you know for a fact that these weapons that you worked on, they're being used domestically today?
Absolutely.
While I was in the service, I found out that there is an ongoing, non-consensual human experiment, and it's testing a human-machine interface weapon.
Tools that can directly communicate with and deliver information right into people's nervous systems.
An implantable neural interface connecting humans directly to computers.
I've worked on projects for the CIA, Justice Department, Department of Defense.
We've run into a few people that claim they got voices in their heads, they sleep inside tinfoil boxes, they do a lot of crazy things, it seems. But when they talk to us, they seem totally normal, they seem totally sane. Are these people crazy, or is the government doing this to them?
The government's doing this to them.
He's not even bothering to hide it.
I want to make this very clear. This is not a conspiracy theory.
So what you're telling me, every one of us should be in fear of this because every one of us at some point will be targeted?
The technology's advanced that far.
So understand that this this supercomputer, it's using a computer multiplexer, which is routing the signal to a tower, satellite, or mobile platform. Then the tower, satellite, or mobile platform relays the signal to the digital receiver, similar to how cell phone technology works. So the digital receiver is tracked and pinpointed in real time, just like a cell phone, because this technology is dependent upon timing and location. Except with CIA and DI mind control technologies, the digital receiver is not a phone, it's a human brain. The brain of the victim has been digitalized by the nanotechnology inside of it.
Cellular components of the brain communicate with each other through magnetic signals, with the magnetite particles acting as tiny antennas, simultaneously receiving information throughout the different parts of the brain. Magnetite also acts as an antenna for external electromagnetic fields.
We'll be able to pinpoint how we can change the biological activity of various brain areas quite well, and as a consequence change the overall networks of how the brain functions to give you cognitions, emotions, behaviors. We can do that.
In 1953, the Russians began to bombard the U.S. Embassy in Moscow with electromagnetic radiation in the microwave spectrum, but the fact was kept secret from the embassy employees. Dr. Henry Kissinger sent a secret memo giving hazard pay to embassy personnel in the 1970s. Before the attacks, the USSR had met with the US to try to head off an arms race in electromagnetic weapons, but were refused. In retaliation, they began microwaving the US Embassy. It is possible that the US government took advantage of the situation and used the embassy staff as microwave guinea pigs. The Department of Defense's Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA, set up a lab at Walter Reed Army Institute of Research and participated in Project Pandora. Scientists began zapping monkeys to study the biological effects of highly concentrated microwave frequencies.
Rosaday was working with the CIA and exchanging technology and study data with the Russians back in the 60s and 70s and even further back, and he figured out scientifically, demonstratively, how non-ionizing radiation at various specific frequencies from microwaves or from other signals, how they could alter human and animal behavior. For instance, a simple 10 Hz wave could put someone into a stupor within a couple of minutes. Using neuroelectric devices that they developed by the 70s, they could put individuals or entire towns to sleep on command. They can aggravate people, they can alter their sexual preferences, they can delete their memories, they can turn on desire, they can turn on repulsion, and they could otherwise hijack someone's spontaneous and natural behavior. They could literally hijack your nervous system and your brain. And that was 30 or 40 years ago. Now things are very advanced, they're very precise, and they're very far along. There's discussions now at the Davos World Economic Forum that have broached the topic of mind reading and literal mind control. And once things are fast enough with 5G, all bets are off. I don't want to add paranoia, I don't want to make people fearful, but basically, where can you run from this? Once this system is fully launched and up, it's going to be just like the Terminator Genesis system. It's going to be the rise of AI, and it's going to be like there's no looking back.
We must reject the notion that the 5G future will be the sole providence of urban areas. The 5G revolution will touch all corners of our country. We are the pioneers of a new spectrum frontier.
No one gave permission for this because most people don't fully understand what's happening or why it matters. They're going to click on little agreements on their cell phone for the different sites they visit, and they're going to have no idea how much is going to be taken from that. But it's clear that this is not a good bargain, and people need to be warned. They should try to oppose this in their local cities and where they can, and try to challenge these companies, because they don't want to face resistance, and they don't want a population that knows about the dangers and the risks of this technology.
There's no doubt now that electric waves, electromagnetic forces, cause direct biological effects. There's thousands of peer-reviewed papers on this subject. There's no doubt about it. But what are these effects? How are they affecting us? What can we do about it? We're now at a stage where we're putting in what's called 5G, which is a special type of broadcast for high-density information transfers. And it turns out that this is the same frequency bands that are used in crowd dispersal weaponry.
We can also utilize these interventional technologies in those ways that may able to directly affect the brain. Probably the one that you've heard about most recently, most contemporaneously in the literature, is the possibility to use some form of directed energy to affect physiology peripherally and also to affect the physiology and health of the brain. Case in point here, U.S. Embassy personnel in Havana and possibly in China. And of course, there's not a lot that I can tell you about that, although I am one of the researchers on that particular project.
We are convinced these were targeted attacks. We don't like our diplomats being targeted.
Depart your post, he said. Leave Cuba. And they did.
Whatever happened to these people happened as a result of some sophisticated technology that, quite frankly, is so sophisticated we don't understand it.
Once the political people got stuck in their own internal contradictions, it was almost impossible then to get a real serious discussion of what was going on.
The U.S. wouldn't share any evidence of an attack with the Cubans, so they did their own investigation.
Inclusive cuando a mí me hablaron por primera vez de ataque sónico, pensé que me estaban hablando de ciencia ficción, de la guerra de las galaxias o una cosa de eso.
This was an intentional and directed engagement, and that this represents a beta test, a possible probe of a directed energy neuroweapon. And there are a number of countries that had developed initiatives and agenda towards developing just these types of things, the United States included.
The race to 5G is a race America must win, and it's a race that we will win. By next year, the United States is on pace to have more 5G spectrum than any other country in the world. That's a big statement because, as you know, some people got ahead of us. We should have been doing this a long time ago. But we must not rest. The race is far from over. American companies must lead the world in cellular technology. 5G networks must be secure. They must be strong. They have to be guarded from the enemy. We do have enemies out there, and they will be. They must also cover every community, and they must be deployed as soon as possible.
The greatest travesty in American civil rights history is happening right under our nose every day, and people don't even know it exists. And by the time they do, it will be too late. It's two things. Consists of two things. They've been involved in the training, research, and development of it to fully implement it. And the government, who is first in the world to do so, to fully implement and deploy this technology, will have an incomparable advantage over every other government on Earth. So basically what you have is an arms race.
5G, first and foremost, is densification. So it's significantly more transmitters in close proximity to a human, and it is also a sophisticated, illegal, unlawful transmitter. What I mean by that is it is a high gain dielectric lens antenna, and what that allows 5G transmitters to do is to 3D map its environment in your home. The 868 megahertz frequency is specific for battlefield interrogation systems, so sub-gigahertz. It allows the signal to travel through concrete brickwork with ease, and it can actually data gather. It is a target acquiring system. Phased array is basically radar off the battlefield. It is extremely good at identifying targets and being able to lock onto targets. And not only that, it can specifically target you as an individual. So any judge sitting on an interesting case, let's say, any lawyer, any barrister, anybody doing any work that is potentially controversial, your life could be at threat.
With the 5th generation, it's actually a whole new ballgame. It's not using the same technology. They're switching to military-grade millimeter wave technology.
The millimeter wave system itself can be seen here. First, and most importantly, is the millimeter wave sensor and antenna assembly, which perform the real-time detection and tracking of a human subject and return the data to the pan and tilt base, which is what moves the entire assembly and follows the subject as he moves around and maintains the aim at his chest.
MKUltra took place in the lab until the Senate hearing on COINTELPRO, and MKUltra drove the programs underground, out of the laboratory and onto the streets. The human experimental subjects are now in their homes and workplaces. High-tech weapons, such as milliwave radars, are used by the military for urban warfare. These devices see through ordinary building materials and even steel. The human body is largely composed of water and literally lights up, so a target can be tracked inside buildings, turning their homes and workplaces into a fishbowl. These devices are now commonly used for screening passengers at airports. There is no privacy for the target and no place to hide.
In the following demonstration, the screen is split into 3 parts. In the top left is the system assembly, which shall be moving to follow the subject. In the top right is the subject as seen by the color tracking camera, where the oval and rectangle are the location and scale of his head, and the purple circle is the location the antenna is aiming. In the bottom half is the measure of displacement as it is being calculated by the computer in real time. The red circles represent calculated heartbeats. Also on the graph are the locations of heartbeats obtained from an ECG that was gathered simultaneously, shown in green. This is a ground truth used for verification and was not used at all in the algorithm. The sensor starts off aimed at the subject's chest. While he is seated, the subject holds his breath for a while in order to demonstrate that individual heartbeats are visible. As the subject stands up, the system follows his movement and maintains good aim. Now the subject demonstrates the fidelity of the system during lateral motion. Here the subject demonstrates the accuracy of the system during large gross movement. The subject's backward movement is larger than that due to heartbeat and respiration, as is evidenced by the scale of displacement on the bottom of the screen. Even with such large movements, the system continues to process the data with good accuracy. The system works on various body types such as males and females with larger and smaller frames and builds. Although our system is currently intended for homeland and national security applications, this novel technology has a wide range of applications for standoff monitoring of non-stationary targets, including home health care, collision avoidance, condition monitoring of operating machinery, and non-destructive evaluation.
And when you look at this technology, I mean, if you go and look at DARPA reports, come and look at some of the patents that the United States military has put out on what they can do with psychological weapons, all sorts of things, crowd control, active denial, anything you can think of, this is what they can do with 5G. So any type of military application you can think of which has an electromagnetic base, they can do with 5G. And they're putting this out blanket across the population.
The phenomenon known to the alternative research community as chemtrails, and referred to by the British and United States governments as geoengineering or climate remediation, is perhaps one of the most controversial topics on the table today.
So, the connection between chemtrails and 5G.
It's all interconnected. The metallized particulates that would allow the 5G phased array, so basically the radar that would allow it to be able to identify you, so it can watch you, it can identify you in your own home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
For the last X amount of years, we've been through chemtrailing, and that is now the cat is out of the box. We've had these nanoparticulates raining down on humanity for years now, impregnating our bodies, by best accounts staying inside our bodies. Those nanoparticulates, what you're saying, are building up a kind of a phosphorescence glow capability so that we can be flagged up in our homes, behind concrete and steel, inside bunkers, in the basement, doesn't matter where you are. The 5G will be able to now triangulate, map and read you, because you as a living being are impregnated with these nanoparticulates, which are acting as a kind of transmission and reception technology.
It's exactly, absolutely exactly.
Most recently, just a few weeks ago, it was announced that you could then aerosolize nanomaterials. And go one step further, I can create small robotic units, controllable robotic units at the nanoscale, and that these too can be aerosolized to create a nanoswarm of biopenetrable materials that you cannot see, that can penetrate all but the most robust biochemical filters, that are able to integrate themselves through a variety of membranes, mucous membranes, and wherever, mouth, nose, ears, eyes, and they can be done in such a level that their presence is almost impossible to detect, and as such the attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate.
They have the capability now to reduce humanity to the sum total of the data collected on each human network node.
I want to make this very clear. This is not a conspiracy theory.
So what you're telling me, every one of us should be in fear of this because every one of us at some point will be targeted?
The technology's advanced that far.
There is a very real risk that you are going to become a full-blown 24/7 targeted individual. And this technology at that point, when it is nationwide, will be used by automated computers, supercomputer software programming that will manipulate the emotions and the behavior and the thoughts of everybody in the United States of America. And it can all be done remotely. It's very much like the microchip kind of tracking the New World Order, this entire, control grid that's supposed to be rolled out against the American people someday. And I'm here to tell you that it's already here. There isn't going to come a day where there's troops in the streets and tanks rolling down your neighborhood and riot gear and all this stuff. We might have isolated incidents like that. It might get like that every once in a while, but the true control grid is this technology, voice-to-skull, hive mind, behavior manipulation technology, and it can all be done remotely.
The RNN system then remotely monitors and measures all electromagnetic activity of the victim's brain for life.
It's the ultimate weapon.
So the targeted individuals aren't crazy after all.